Hello, we are here. Well, me, the Sun King, Ben McLean, and American Mick are here to talk about the shit show that is currently happening in Virginia. Of course, it's in Virginia. The, riot protests by the alt-right and the far-left groups, as well as, a helicopter crashing and somebody running over a bunch of people with a car.
Wait, helicopter?
Yeah, apparently there was a helicopter. Yeah, two police officers died in a helicopter crash in Charlottesville as well.
That has the most information on it now.
I have gone in 5 minutes from not knowing that anything was happening in Charlottesville to being on the air to talk about it. So
that's fine.
Well, everyone else, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, someone. It's my understanding that this car plowed down the street into counter-protesters, which were basically a bunch of leftist protesters or counter-protesters against the protest of the white nationalists. And someone drove a car into them.
Yeah, at first people like within like minutes or something crazy like that, they didn't track down the guy who did it. They tracked down the guy who sold the car.
Right.
And the guy who sold the car was an Antifa loving anti-Trump guy.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
I feel bad for him now because it's like, oh wait. I just sold the car. Yeah, I sold the murder machine. But speaking of incorrectly blaming people, some of the most infuriating tweets or funniest ones I've seen is people telling Donald Trump that he's directly responsible for this, that he has the blood of these people on his hands.
Yeah, kind of like President Bush could control the freaking weather.
Well, they think apparently he can cause he can move his hand in the Oval Office like he's a Sith and cause a helicopter to crash
and a car to run into people.
Yes.
I looked at somewhere. Apparently, the death toll from the car is up to 16. I don't know if that included.
Oh no, it can't be that. Before there was only one fatality from the car. That must be injured.
It moved up to 3.
Oh my goodness!
It moved up to 3, and maybe it's casualties, and the person read it wrong, but.
Well, one thing we know that.
Oh my God, Zimmy!
Terrorists are dumber than Islamic terrorists because at least
Zimmy just said, "I totally thought it was a black dude's car with those tinted windows."
I mean, let's be honest here.
You're smart enough to use an actual truck instead of just a car.
Oh, this is true.
I'm just thinking about this wasn't particularly surprising that this would turn violent and all that, but the one thing is that
the nationalists who seem to have been the most violent in this situation. I can't see. I just can't picture Robert E. Lee getting behind the wheel of a car and driving it into a pavilion. Can you?
I can imagine William Tecumseh Sherman doing that, but
yeah, maybe, but I can't see General Lee doing that.
But yeah, I mean, this is the thing is that this was about a lot of it was about the Charlottesville wanting to remove, or I don't know if they've removed it already, or this is their plan to remove
the statue of Robert E. Lee.
Yeah, have they done that yet, or have they yet to do it?
I don't know.
Well, either way, this is the thing is anytime this happens. When they want to remove it, this should show them a reminder of this is going to happen every time you want to remove a statue.
Yep.
You think they might want to think twice about doing it when they know that.
I think that one of the things we're going to see is that white nationalists are actually going to get more respect than they got before.
That's already happened.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. This is only legitimizing them.
I'm not legitimizing them. I'm just telling you.
No, not you. The whole event.
Yeah, well, they're going to get more respect than they got before, and the reason is that's what we see with Muslims. When Muslims blow people up, they get more respect. Their ideology gets more respect. And Christians, they don't blow people up, so they don't
Are you saying that? Wait, Ben, are you saying that Christians need to start blowing people up?
No, I think what he means
seem to be getting. I'm not saying we actually should, but you know that does seem to be the message that seems to we seem to be getting. That you know, if you want to get attention, if you want your ideology to get more respect, you should get more violent.
Well, wow.
I don't.
Ben, I didn't know you would be the extremist.
Well, I'm not saying good. I'm just saying descriptively, that's what in fact works.
Mm-hmm. I'm saying this is that like I'm really just trying to think about what the optics are going to be. I wonder if the alt-right is going to be happy with this. I mean, they're certainly not happy with the guy running people over, but like if it was like, you know, anytime there's a violent protest, that sort of benefits them because it gives them lots of attention and it sort of legitimizes them because it's like there's violence on both sides. It's like I'm curious, like, because the left can't really just keep ignoring Antifa, can they?
Well, the point I'm trying to make is that if we don't want this to be the case, that getting more violent is a successful tactic, then we need to have a major reform to how media works.
I think we can only start thinking about that once the current media system collapses.
We need to stop making these kinds of stories be as big as they are.
The problem is that these giant stories get these media sites lots and lots of money.
Yeah, we really have to figure out how we can make it so that political violence doesn't succeed.
That's not. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, this is the sad thing is that I think what this is, and I think this is the video I'm going to work on this week, and maybe a history video, maybe, is that what we're seeing when you like look at Charlottesville skeptics, this is the death of liberalism.
Yes,
liberalism is the idea that you know people with very different ideologies can coexist according to certain principles. The problem is that the center, the actual basis of the consensus of an American society, doesn't exist anymore. You have two consensus, which are drifting further and further to the right. You're going to have the alt-right's view of what America should be and the progressives' view of what America should be.
And Twitter has censored my post about this. Great job, Twitter.
Wow, what did you do?
It makes sense. I mean, given that we went through a recession and yeah, especially the recession, I think, and then you know, of course, some other things have been going on. It seems like liberalism and liberal leaders really weren't giving answers that the public wanted, and it gives rise to extremes. You know. As soon as something bad happens in society, people ask for change, and they don't want to seek for change from the people that seem to have started the problem in the first place. Mm-hmm. So they go to extremists on either the left or the right. Well, really, the only thing we can do if we're going to be sensible, rational individuals is give them an alternative that isn't as
much better
insane as either the progressives or the alt-right. That's really the only thing. So,
yeah, essentially, I sort of view as the fascists or the Nazis and the fascists. They believed in the idea of the third alternative, which is derived from a German concept from the late 19th and early 20th century called Sonderweg, special way, which is this sort of idea that Germany had the third. Like they were the correct option between sort of Russian despotism and barbarism and like French/British like liberal decadent democracy. The Nazis sort of took that and said or fascists more broadly took this and sort of thought this as the idea of, fascists are the third way between communism and capitalism. And I'm thinking perhaps sort of traditional I would sort of want it to shape into like conservative Christianity being sort of offered as the fourth alternative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I have a feeling that if there's going to be another alternative, it might, like what fascism was, it might end up borrowing things from both sides, and I don't see Christian traditionalism fulfilling both sides of
Well, we'd be
progressive
essentially
and the
harkening back to what the consensus of Western societies would have been in the pre-20th century era.
Mhm.
That this was a society founded upon these objective moral principles in Christianity. Ben, sorry, we can't hear you.
So
I didn't say anything. I had some stupid video on Twitter start playing by accident.
Oh, okay. All right.
well, I'm of the opinion that
You know,
this-
Hold on, Ben.
maybe like in case anybody doesn't know like where we're coming from, like people who are new, don't know your channel very well, don't know any of this. Maybe we ought to just lay out where we're coming from on all
Well,
that.
we're not all on the same side. I mean, we definitely have a lot of overlapping and agreed views in a general sense. But I suppose if you wanted me to say that, like, well, I have an entire video dedicated to the question of whether or not I'm all right.
Yeah,
I did it on April 1st. Yeah, I just said, yeah, I'm not. I would not identify as part of the alt-right. I would be a dissident sort of right-wing voice, but I'm not alt-right. Essentially, think of me as like, imagine the alt-right, but with a less emphasis on race and a bigger emphasis on Jesus.
I'm not even alt-right. I'm fusionist. Reagan's not that bad to me.
Mhm.
Well, anyway, if you want to really, what I've seen from this is, I don't think that this is going to appease the alt-right to the wider public at all. I think what this will do is it'll have a similar effect as
Is it just me or is
Antifa-
it robotic?
I think part of
I'm
the
not a
problem
robot.
is that although we ourselves don't consider ourselves to be alt-right, like the
Mhm.
media might, and
Certainly, yeah. People would think that, people like me, the distributist, and even Bet. The thing is, they're just going to call everybody that's not a quote unquote conservative.
well, yeah,
alt-right.
anybody
Yeah.
who's not a neocon.
I mean, it's
classified as-
Donald Trump. They think Donald Trump is alt-right, even though he's much more liberal than we are. And we'd be, I guess, if you're just going to look at it as if you're just going to use the model of like a left and right line spectrum,
Mhm.
we're more liberal, quote unquote, than the alt-right is.
Right.
Sure, I guess. I really hate that word.
I know, but it's just to use that model. The fact is that Trump is probably more liberal than us, and we're probably more liberal in certain ways than the alt-right is, and they think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Trump is alt-right.
They
Mhm.
think Ben Shapiro is alt-right.
I mean, I thought Milo was.
Oh yeah, they think.
Milo's a faggot, so I mean that's about.
Hey, bundle of sticks.
That's a mean.
Well, these
You mean the things that he puts in his butt?
Better than the bananas with TJ.
No. Gosh.
Okay, we're not on the Senate, so let's be a little more decorum here.
A little
Yeah.
more decorum, yeah.
A little more? Okay. So let me get a Christmas tree. Dress it up.
I thought you were an atheist.
I might
What are
say
you
a
doing with a Christmas tree?
few rise.
I like Santa. Fuck you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh wait, we
Depends.
finally have proof. We know that Sonny's a male now. We were debating whether you were a man or a woman like this whole time.
Oh my God!
What?
Stop.
hi.
Back to the conversation.
Yeah, let Ben talk. There's more important things than the gender of Sonny.
PM this to me because I need to figure this shit out.
Anyway,
Okay, all right, everyone. All right, let's let Ben talk.
Okay, I was trying to say I might say a few things about my view on the alt-right and where they came from and what makes them different from the previous right. And you have to. People don't understand like the history of the conservative movement in America and the Republican Party, and where these things came from. What the history of it, according to the left, is everyone except us is a Nazi, and it's okay to punch Nazis. Therefore, it's okay to punch anyone who disagrees with us.
Mhm.
And that's all you need to know, really, according to the left. But
Mhm.
if you actually study it out, then you'd realize that no, Nazism is still a very small, very unpopular view.
Mhm.
And what happened was after during World War II, there was a consensus, a very strong moral consensus, that the Nazis were evil, and we needed to defeat the Nazis and their allies, being the other fascist powers and the Japanese.
The interesting thing about that, I'm hearing an echo.
Oh well, I wanted to sort of tell
Okay.
the story. During that period, the United States actually allied with the Soviet Union, and we've had weird things like FDR calling Stalin Uncle Joe. That was just really bizarre.
Well,
But during World War II, we were allies with the Soviets. Well, after World War II, some of us realized what the Soviets were up to, and some of us didn't in America.
Well, some of us did, and some of
weren't
us
listened
did,
to.
and they just said, "That's great. We should be doing what they're doing." But
Yeah.
they didn't disagree with the Soviets with the essentially their premises and their aims. They sort of just disagreed with. They didn't even really disagree with the tactics. They just disagreed with their optics, because it's like, oh, the Soviets are killing millions of people in like forced labor camps and gulags. That's not going to fly well in the United States. Let's just do it through the schools.
Right.
And I
Well,
think this would be my primary criticism of the 1980s, conservative sort of Reagan era, is that not enough time was spent on trying to take back the schools before the because by the end of the 80s, the progressives had essentially taken full control of the education system.
yeah. Well, what happened was we had the left, who were largely made up of crypto commies.
Or actual communists.
Yeah.
Right.
We have to remember, Joseph
McCarthy was right. Yeah, McCarthy was right about.
Crypto means that they're actually communists. They just don't call themselves that.
Okay. Sure.
I mean, the left was just totally infested with crypto commies. Now, not everyone was a crypto commie, and there certainly wasn't any actual control from Moscow going on, at least not in the Democratic Party. I don't think Moscow controlled the Democratic Party or anything like that. Well, all I'm
Just some
saying
members.
is, on an ideological level, there really wasn't that much of a difference, and it just took a while for that to sort itself out. But on the right, then, what we had wasn't a coherent ideology. It was just anti-communism, basically.
Mhm.
This was after World War II. There was, on the left, there was basically various forms of socialism that were trying to sort of water down communism to be more palatable. And then there was the anti-communists, which came in several varieties.
I'd have to add this, and this is the huge caveat, and this links directly to what's happening now, is that the other specific thing they have to know about what happened during the 50s and the post-war era is that you had I would say, through Truman, Eisenhower, and then Kennedy, and then is that you had the idea of the post-war consensus that the left and the right were not actually so sort of set apart as they seem to be now, is that you had this sort of consensus of this is what America stands for. We are anti-communist, we're pro democracy and civil rights, and well, that was the big issue. But the fact is, there was this sort of post-war consensus that was established in the center, and that people like Eisenhower essentially tried to ride that center. And, the idea of Eisenhower being this extremely polarizing president, of having an extremely polarized election every 4 years, that wasn't nearly as bad as it is now.
Mhm.
You still have, and this is the reason why this is happening, is that this sort of center consensus about what American society stands for has evaporated over the past 60 years.
Yeah.
It's not even just that.
I wanted to get to where the current factions of the right came from, though.
Sure.
And I keep going on all these tangents. I need to cut it out. So what we had were the anti-communists, and they came in several varieties. There were the Christians who were anti-communist because communism is an essentially atheistic ideology. It's inherently atheistic. And then there were the capitalist libertarians who were against communism because communism is a socialist ideology. It promotes socialism as an economic system, and that's a threat to capitalism and or freedom. And then there were the
Neo-fascists?
The what?
Like neo-fascists, or?
I'm getting there, but there were military types, or there were the sort of people who were all about national defense more than anything else. Yeah, and they were anti-communism on the grounds that communism is a threat to our way of life. And then there were the white supremacists and neo-fascists who were opposed to communism because Hitler decided to fight Stalin for some reason. And now what we needed was to turn all of these factions into a political organization that could win elections. And that was accomplished in the 1950s by the formation of the Fusionist Conservative Alliance, which was largely organized around or starting with William F. Buckley and National Review magazine. National Review published authors from all these, well, not all, but from several of these different anti-communist factions, but only people who were mainstream enough to maintain mainstream centrist credibility. And National Review was kind of selective about it, at least to some degree, about who it allowed to write for it and who got called a conservative. And it was Buckley and National Review, and then a few others who piled on, who got to define what conservative was going to mean. And that's how we got this weird alliance between capitalism and Christianity.
And Warhawks.
And Warhawks. All three of which would not necessarily have gone together before the 1950s. Okay? Mm-hmm. You have to understand, these are not ideologies that naturally belong together.
No, definitely not.
They were even brought together for...
You even had the...
to achieve common political ends.
You even had the idea of Christians being a sort of political faction or political, demographic. That really wouldn't have existed in the pre-war era, because the idea was that before the war, everyone in America would have already been Christian.
You would
have just had the factions between Catholics and Protestants, but sort of after the, I would say that William F. Buckley and people like William F. Buckley and Billy Graham helped sort of start breaking down the barrier between Protestant and Catholic, sort of. And now it's like the idea of, I think among most mainstream evangelicals and Catholics, is that like they're essentially on the same side. They're not
the only issue with misconceptions held by either side about the other.
Yeah, but I think in the mainstream, like, you don't have like a mass hysteria of Protestants about Catholics taking over the country.
No.
But the fact is that, before the post-war era, you didn't have the idea of Christians being a sort of, demographic that a certain party had to go after, because I think what the Republicans sort of seemed to capitalize on, though, with fusionism, was the fact that increasingly, as the Democrats were becoming more and more progressive after the civil rights era, like they were starting to throw, Christian morality and Christian interests under the bus in an era that was increasingly becoming post-Christian.
Yeah. Well, the thing to realize about this is the reason it's relevant for us here is that Buckley and the conservative fusion kept two very dangerous factions out of the conservative mainstream. First would be the Ayn Randites, who call themselves objectivists and preach the virtue of selfishness, and they're atheists and so forth. And they're the really hardcore libertarians.
Mm-hmm.
They only let in relatively moderate libertarians. They kept out anarchists and
they let in people like Ron Paul.
What?
Although Ron Paul actually, when he ran in 1989, he ran for the Libertarian Party ticket.
Yeah, that's why there's a Libertarian Party instead of just a Republican Party.
It's because of Ron Paul.
Because the Republicans weren't kept out the more radical end of the libertarian spectrum. The other faction that was kept out was the racists.
Mm-hmm.
To a very large extent, Buckley kept the actual honest-to-God racists, not the nonsense, anyone who disagrees with me is a racist, but the actual ideological racists were kept out of the conservative movement.
What about Strom Thurmond?
By Buckley for the most part. Not all, this was done wasn't done perfectly, but it was done.
I think the point overall is that you're right, is that essentially, the fusionist consensus or fusionist movement did essentially, was sort of good at, exercising, the fact that we're not racist, of course, the fact that, Distributus is powered up. Yeah. He's coming online. But yeah, it's the fact that, as we're seeing right now, all the a whole huge amounts of Republican senators in Congress are saying they're denouncing the alt-right, which it's in this whole Charlottesville thing, that's all well and good, but they need to be equally condemning the Antifa and left-wing, rioters as well. That's all
the only reason you won't see politicians jumping to do that today is because it has bad optics today.
Unless you're Donald Trump.
But don't worry.
Trump never has bad optics.
Because you'd be
Can
in
I
jail.
ask what the topic is?
It's supposed to be about
Talking
Charlottesville.
about
but
what's
we've
happening
gotten
in
into a bunch
Charlottesville,
of shit.
but we're
Yeah,
digressing.
We've been derailed.
This question, not someone else.
Yeah, I would like to answer this. Yeah, we're talking about the events, and I want to discuss sort of the optics of this and what this sort of signifies, which I believe further signifies the collapse of the center and the lack of any American consensus anymore. And Ben sort of just wanted to go over the idea of what the conservative movement is now. I'm actually not really all that. I don't really all that much understand why he brought it up, but
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
Okay, keep going.
The reason the alt-right in America is called alt is because it's trying to provide an alternative to that fusionist conservative consensus that was the Republican ideal.
Yeah.
That's what it is an alternative to.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't even necessarily mean racist
or Nazi.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
that
that remains to be defeated.
I have yet to meet an alt-right person who actually sort of seems to know what they're talking about, who isn't concerned with race, some kind of racialist doctrine.
Well, this all depends though on how do we define the alt-right, because here's the thing is, most progressives probably think we would be alt-right.
Well, because the progressives just define alt-right as anybody who's right of center-right, pretty much. I mean, if you don't, Like, I mean, libertarians to them are probably like the furthest you can really go before you're alt-right, which is odd. But I mean, like, I don't hold any race realist views personally, but I'd probably be considered alt-right just because I'm a monarchist.
And I'd be I think most of us, just because we hold sort of dissident, almost reactionary views on a lot of issues.
Oh yeah, and
being a trad makes you alt-right.
yeah. I mean, like, and I have extremely traditional moral views. That's true.
Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking just that, you know, I'm just interested in what a lot of the skeptics are going to think about this. Do you think, you know, what do you think this says to them? It's like, hey, you know that liberal discourse you like so much? Look at Charlottesville. I want to, like, take them, grab the sides of their head, and force them to look at Charlottesville and go, see that? That is the pile of burning ash. That is liberalism.
Are you going to drive them by car? And when you drive them by car, will they be in the back seat or on the windshield?
Well, no, I was going to take them by helicopter, but apparently you took the horrible joke already. We're all being insensitive here, which is really disgusting.
I'm very sorry.
We're not on Discord. Let's have some decorum.
I mean, what? You're not, like, your channel's not in trouble if you like keep doing this shit, right?
I don't know. If I hear the feds knocking on my door, I'll tell you.
Well, I mean, Twitter's shadow banned me today, so it's the first time for everything.
Mm-hmm. And this is the thing that just, if you know, on Twitter, like, what the people on the left, they just think that, you know, they do legitimately seem to think that, like, it's okay to, the dissidence, the cognitive dissonance is amazing when you look at it, it's like they go, love Trump's hate, we all need to love each other, but fucking kill Nazis.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Right.
I love Trump's hate because it's actually what we are.
I mean,
they think that go ahead.
Pardon my ignorance, but what do we know about this thing at this stage? This Charlottesville violence? Do we know anything about
the news on it yet?
Well, as far as we know, is that you know, to sort of protest a removal or proposed removal of a Confederate statue of Robert E. Lee in Charlottesville, Virginia, the alt-right was sort of having this thing called Unite the Right. And before the full rally was, and this was filled with, like, a lot of legitimate Nazis. Like, there was, like, members there was Nazi flags and members of the Klan there.
There were Hitler salutes and torture and shit.
This isn't like what happened at Berkeley, where it's just a bunch of, you know, dude bros with, like, Trump shirts. These were actual Nazis.
It wasn't a bunch of Kekistanis.
Oh yeah.
These were actual, honest to God, race realists.
I need to explain before you interrupt, Ben. Is that, like, so then, and obviously there was counter protests to it, and they got out of hand right before the rally was supposed to start. The police was attempting, I guess, through the afternoon to disperse it, and then apparently one of the counter protests where a lot of people were counter protesting I think they've identified him as probably somebody who was alt-right, a white male who that's all we know.
That's all we need to know, isn't it?
Yeah, drove his car into a crowd and killed 1, 2, or more people.
He killed one person and injured 19.
We don't have any more information than I've heard. Basically.
Yeah, just that this is FUBAR and this was a violent. Yeah, and everybody's now. Yeah, and Trump made statements condemning violence on many sides.
I would expect a ramping up of censorship on the internet after this.
I wouldn't be too surprised if this wasn't a false flag operation.
No, I doubt it.
No, it was legit.
Did you just false flag me?
No.
The scary part though is, like, everybody is, like, you know, they have pictures. It's like all the lefties, like, on Twitter, like, they have all these pictures. They're trying to take pictures of, like, they're taking pictures of, like, the far right protesters, and they're, like, saying, everyone, what's their information? Where do they work? Like, they're actively trying to dox these people.
Oh my God! They can't do what 4chan does at night.
As we should increasingly expect.
Doxing is a tool of the left. It is and it will continue to be used as a tool of the left. It's very effective for them to.
No, I don't know about that. I don't know.
I don't know necessarily left. I think it's more.
Who was hitting
Really, I mean, I think it's really helpful for them. I mean, they can just, they just reveal that like
this
one of
thing,
their
they probably
opponents-
didn't really understand it until the thing with CNN happened, and then they started feeling like, well, if my news outlet is saying it's okay to do this, it's okay for me to do that.
Exactly.
You think this started with CNN?
No,
No, I
I
think
don't
it
think
just sort of
so.
brought into light.
yeah.
I don't think so. It's an old tactic, really stemming from the some of the websites like 4chan and all that kind of stuff.
Hacking the elite FBI
The
Russian
elite
hacking site known as 4chan.
Exactly. this 4chan. No, but it started there, but it's really only been effective by the left because they've been, of course, taking the information of right-wing people, but it's more effective if they do it because we're considered more of the fringe, and that's
it's obvious. It's obvious why it's more effective by the left.
Exactly. We could, as right-wing people, some of us might have doxed some left-wing people, but it's almost fruitless because there's not much you can do with that information without having to do something directly to them on your own terms instead of getting them fired.
If you said to if you called a left wing play, like if you called Google and said to hey, one of your staff is a member of Antifa, I don't think they'd do anything.
No.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
Maybe
this isn't the McCarthy era anymore. It's not like you can get you don't get put on trial for being a communist anymore.
Unfortunately.
Shame. I was going to say,
The problem with the McCarthy era wasn't that communism is okay. It was that they were accusing people who obviously aren't communists.
Well, the problem with it was McCarthy was right that there was communist infiltration in the United States. The problem was just the optics and how it went about, because it turned from we have to go find communists that are trying to bring down our society from the inside to, look, they're trying to jail all these poor innocent actors.
Yeah, I
mean,
mean,
of course, celebrity culture has such a massive holdover.
Ball, that was just the last straw. Lucille Ball going after the I Love Lucy lady for being a communist. What the?
Yeah. Didn't she also? And she literally did radio broadcasts to help boost morale in the war effort.
McCarthy was right, but he should have been more conservative in his accusations.
McCarthy
he should have been
right.
or at least he should have been more discreet.
Yes.
He shouldn't have gone mad with power.
McCarthy was right.
But you think the relevant question is how the Red Scare was mismanaged 60 years ago?
No,
Well,
we're just making interjections.
Yeah, I think if we go back to Charlottesville, I'm just thinking about what is the what do you think the alt distributors? What do you think the alt right's going to believe? What do you think they're going to think about this? How do you think they're going to view this?
Condemn it.
Well, I mean, they're obviously going to condemn it. I mean, it's fairly easy to see how this plays out. The question is just how fast is the left going to bring down the truncheon on people like us?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's going to be pretty fast because writing stories about how. I mean, I just saw an article that the New York Times put out. Quote. False equivalences between white bigots and their protesters. That was some guy's remark about Trump's opinion of what happened in Charlottesville, saying violence on many sides. They're calling it a false equivalence between the alt-right and their protesters.
There is a total one-to-one equivalence right there.
Well, no, but that's what the media is going to publish anyway, or at least put opinion pieces out.
What I'm saying is there is an equivalence. It's not a false equivalence. It is a true equivalence.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether what you think. It's what the publishers think.
Yeah.
Not to interject, but I think that what to take away from all of this is that we're just gonna have more and more crazies try and hurt people and do shit like this.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah.
And eventually, what is this gonna lead down towards? And from what I can see, it's not gonna be good.
No.
Well, that's clear what it's going to directly lead to. It's going to directly lead to the total censorship of internet platforms that are owned by the left.
Yeah, this is the thing, right? Is that it's not going to be. Unfortunately, I don't think it's not going to turn out as some people think. Well, I'm not saying unfortunately, but to condone this, but it's not going to be, as a lot of people are like joking, this is going to be a civil war. No, it's going to be that every time there is going to be a right, anything that whiffs of being alt-right, it's going to be immediately censored. And police are just going. You're going to see in liberal and Democrat-run cities where you have protests like this. Let's say like New Orleans or I don't know, Austin or some cities throughout the South or throughout the country run by Democrats. Anytime there's an attempted right-wing protest or counter-protest, it's going to be immediately shut down by the police.
Mm-hmm.
I predict this happening, or at least it seems.
I think it's pretty easy to see. Yeah, this is the direction it's going. The question is just how fast.
And the other issue is question is when this keeps happening, the alt-right keeps losing platform after platform to express its views. What are they going to do?
I mean, next thing you know, they're gonna force people who are alt-right to wear yellow stars or some shit like that. I mean,
yeah,
wait,
and I'm just thinking like
the ball, guys. The ball really isn't in the alt-right's court.
No, it really. They're at a huge disadvantage.
The question is, what is the progressive establishment going to do, and how far they're going to go,
and how far can they go?
That's.
And I mean,
at this stage, what's the limit?
We may see some sort of reverse McCarthy trials where, like, anybody who's maybe an alt-right gets like put on trial,
and then the pendulum swings back, so to speak.
I think that as of right now, I think immediate actions they're going to try and take is they're just going to keep trying to push this story and narrative that these alt-righters, basically that we're under threat of a Nazi takeover in America. Mm-hmm. And instead of them doing things explicitly, they're going to first, if they're smart, and what they seem to be doing is keep pushing it and getting, the progressive, left-wing activists to try and shut them down, dox them, and hurt the alt-right. Because it's, it puts it out of their hands, and it's much easier for them to. And then at that point, the progressives in the media don't even really have to censor anybody because they've already been censored by activists.
Hey, you guys! Breaking news: there's this guy, Joel Van Guelowy.
Oh yeah, I know. He's not the guy that did it.
He's not the guy.
Yeah, that's the sad part. Is apparently within only an hour or so of the incident of the guy hitting the people with the car, they found this guy. And he's an anti-Trump left-wing Antifa member. But the problem is that he is not the one that drove the car. He's the one, I think it's he's the guy who sold the car.
Found its way to Ohio from Michigan. From Michigan to Ohio, sorry.
He's just posting on Facebook, I'm not the guy, you idiots.
Yeah, I feel bad about that.
Oh, man.
Yeah, no, I honestly kind of feel bad for him because...
Wait, for who?
For the Joel guy to get unnecessarily blamed like that, but I also feel kind of bad that we gave a left winger that kind of attention.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going back to the whole how the alt-right is going to condemn this. It's going to be pretty easy to say that you just had this guy who was ready to leave because. If I can recall, because I'm on a Discord, I don't really pay attention to it until today, really. That I guess some of those guys were at the Charlottesville protest, and they were getting ready to pretty much leave, more or less, because things were just getting bad, and they didn't want to get people to get hurt.
Were they on the alt-right side or
on the alt-right side? On the alt-right side, they wanted to they wanted to leave. Things were getting too hectic. Mm-hmm. It wasn't worth it, especially given that the police are more or less against them. And given that they were ready to pull out, it's not too hard to imagine that you had this guy who was leaving the protest and then saw the protest and then said, "Okay, I'm just going to run my car into it." If the alt-right goes with that narrative, it's going to be very easy for them to distance themselves from this incident.
Wait, what are you talking about?
How the
the alt right. You think the alt right's going to easily distance themselves from this? Like
If they spin the narrative,
them and they control the
I'm not buying
narrative. What?
The alt-right doesn't control
They
the
can
narrative.
control
And
their own narrative.
guys, look. To me, this is simple. This is an utter victory for the progressives. This justifies their next round of pushes against the right wing.
I'm not saying
Hold on. They've successfully associated right-wing speech with violence. They can now launch the next push to deplatform right-wing thought across the board, and the alt-right really has nothing to say against it.
I'm not saying
Nothing
that's
that anyone
not
will listen
true.
to.
I'm not saying that's not true. That's just
I
going to
understand.
be the story they'll tell themselves.
Well, they can tell
Yeah,
us
but
whatever they want to.
This is what the narrative in the media is going to be everywhere except Fox News, of course.
And even Fox News is sort of doing it because the problem is this: is that if this was just like again like what happened at Berkeley, where it's just sort of like alt-light Kekistanis guy, just frat boys in like Trump shirts, not actual Nazis, then they would have there'd be total opposition from the right wing, against what the left did here. But the problem is there were actual Nazis here. Yeah.
This is going to be an unmitigated route for anybody who opposes the progressive movement today. There's no upside to this. If you oppose the progressive movement, this is pure victory for them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to say. I mean, anyone else can say whatever they want to. That's what the fact remains. The only question is how far they can take this victory and push it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, now they can say that all alt-right people have the potential to drive a car through you and kill you. So, I mean...
Yes. And, that will be heavily supported.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can just respond back that Muslims drive trucks.
They don't care.
They don't care.
They're not going to...
That's not going to fly.
I mean, the alt-right could pull a Muslim card and be like, we're so oppressed or some shit like that.
No, that's not going to happen either.
But this is the thing, is that you don't actually have to care about consistency or being called hypocrites when you control the media and the academia. That it's like that's why endless screaming about to progressives about, but what about Islam? That's why that never ever works. It's because they don't need it. They don't need to prove that they're not hypocrites because this is the
The left is built on hypocrisy.
I was just throwing a joke. It was just a joke.
I know, but again, this is the thing that I've always said is like right now, like this is peasants criticizing the king. The peasants can be completely right about their criticisms, but the king is still the king. He's still in power, and they're not. So it doesn't really matter.
Am I remembering that? I need to write that down for the next time we're arguing about why monarchism is a bad idea.
It's just an
I
example, Ben.
was about to wonder, Fritz, why were you using that?
Because I think it's a good analogy. It's nothing. It's just an analogy. Don't get all huffed up about this.
Sorry, I started laughing. It turned into
Don't spurg. Whatever you do, don't spurg.
Now,
But yeah.
Who are you talking to?
Now, I wonder though, what would happen if there was an even bigger outbreak of violence from the left tomorrow?
They wouldn't report on it.
Who cares? They wouldn't report on it. They have burnt Berkeley to the ground in a way, but no one reported that.
Well, if
Questions are sort of
able to go
trying
live,
a fundamental misunderstanding of the position we're in.
Mhm.
well, if Fox News was able to go live with city here or there is on fire because
They're one network, and they've been completely what is it called? Delegitimized.
Delegitimized.
Yeah, they've been
can't
that
fall
ever
down.
since the entire Bush era and even the Obama era. It's painted like the only people who watch Fox News are a bunch of crazies. All right, or not crazies, but just a bunch. This fringe group of right-wing people who don't want to listen to real facts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let Ben talk.
Fox News, just because they are in fact on cable and they get into millions of homes, buildings everywhere, they can determine that some stories cannot get ignored. They actually have the power to make sure that some stories can't be ignored. They can't determine how the other networks will spin the stories, but if Fox really covers something, the other networks can't ignore it.
I actually sort of have to agree with Ben here because, like Fox did cover Berkeley. Fox did cover that.
Yeah, do you think that without Fox, all those other networks would have been covering Berkeley? I don't think so.
True.
It's not going to have the same kind of, current as something like this is going to have. This is going to be a point that the media is going to pick up for a very long time. Okay, so you have Fox News, right? You have Fox News, right? One major network. What else is that going to kind of bounce off of, really, aside from response posting? You're going to have, I don't know, Breitbart, National Review. The left wing has so many more networks. They can they control the current of society so much more powerfully than Fox News. Okay, these other networks can make a story about this, but who knows how they're going to spin it, or if they're going to even cover it well. Because let me put it this way. Okay. If you were to have another Berkeley tomorrow and CNN were to cover it, would they just be covering it because it's news and that's it? Or would they cover it and be like, oh, what does this mean for the left? They're not going to do the latter. But with this protest, of course they're going to cover it and be like, oh, what does this mean for the right? Mm-hmm. That's the kind of coverage that that the left wing media, progressive media, is going to bring up. They're not going to do the same thing for the left wing. They're only going to report it as a story. That's it.
Okay, so we're missing a fundamental power asymmetry. How much funding did Berkeley lose because of the reports on the Berkeley riots? I'd say close to 0%.
Yeah.
I think. Hold on. I think that when you look at these emerging dissident right movements, this whole unite the right thing, right? I mean, this was supposed to be an attempt to create a coalition. That attempt is now dead.
Mm-hmm.
No one will attempt this for a very long time.
I also think taking the name Unite the Right makes it look even worse because now it makes it look like the entirety of the right had something to do with it.
Not only that, the dissident right-wing forces need money. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, that money is gone.
Listen,
gone.
The fact that the alt-right failed to form a coalition, that's good news, actually.
The idea, okay.
I don't want the right to be dominated by racialists.
The mainstream coalition of the right is now dead. I'm going to repeat this. The fusionist coalition of the right is effectively dead.
Yeah, but that was.
There's going to be a new. There's a new coalition. There's going to be a new coalition, or there's not. This latest attempt to form a coalition has failed.
Right.
And future attempts along the same lines will have to contend with the legacy of this day going forward.
Yeah, but the thing is, if this had succeeded in forming into a coalition, that would have been very bad because it would have been a coalition dominated by the racialists, and we do not want that.
Yeah, and then Trump and every Republican is going to have to distance themselves from their own base.
I think that the problems are more manifest than that. I think that laughing at the failures of this attempt only make the second attempt to create a right coalition all the more daunting, regardless if you like their approach to the issues of race or not. Regardless,
the problem is also it's like
your problem has just become twice as hard.
It's also just like the idea of, hey, let's laugh. It's like, hey, let's laugh at that boat that got hit by a tidal wave, even though that tidal wave is only a short ways behind us.
Well, I don't think any of our people are going to start driving.
No, I'm saying when the left comes after us. Oh. They're going to when they come after the alt-right, they're going to start coming after everybody else. Guess who they think is alt-right? Us. We can distance themselves. we can like, even if we're legitimately not alt-right, they think we are.
I mean, basically, and it's because, social liberalism or social conservatism is now, well, I guess I would even say social traditionalism, not conservatism, because it seems like social conservatism is just libertarianism now. But anyway, social traditionalism is an alt-right ideology to any left-winger now, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying, maybe homosexuality shouldn't be legal is like automatically met with.
Well, even just if you just say, like, if you're, even the thing that sort of pisses me off is like the position this keeps putting conservative Christians in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that now they have to denounce the alt-right, because that's the most bizarre thing when you have like Southern Baptists talking about, like, they're perfectly fine to have the total ire of the progressive media when they want to talk about how they're in favor of they're pro-life and they're pro-traditional family, but for some reason they completely cuck whenever it comes to race. And I'm still racking my head over it because it's not just changing demographics. It has to be more than that.
What are you talking about?
So, yeah, there's a divide even in this chat. If you're going to quote unquote not cuck on race,
what does this mean?
Yeah,
it means
it contradicts what Ben said, that any concept of racialism has zero place. And you see, we're seeing the difficulty now with forming any rightward coalition. We're just bleeding away any.
Since my stream, so let me talk about this. Is that explaining what I mean? But I don't mean that, like, obviously I don't want Christians to go hail the white race. I'm just saying that as I've been saying ever since I started my channel, there's a huge problem I see within Christian conservative circles of them being okay with racial narratives on the other side, that they're racist against white people, and that they're perfectly fine with stuff like Black Lives Matter, and like literally saying that churches need to become more diverse, i.e. less white. Right. That's the thing I have a problem with.
Black power, but they're against white power, and they should be against both black power and white.
Yeah, they try and say they are. I just wish they'd be vocal about it. Like they sort of have to say they're in the awkward position where they have to admit they can't be that Christians cannot be in favor of the official organization of Black Lives Matter, because it's an organization that says it's explicitly against the Judeo-Christian idea of the family.
I don't know, guys. We seem to be sort of in the thrall that like anti-white power, anti-black power answers the questions we're dealing with in a 21st century where we have millions of third world immigrants in the West. What if Merkel came out and said we're taking more migrants in, but don't worry, we're against Arab power?
I'm not talking about this as a whole. I'm talking about these specific instances.
These are the questions, right? The problem is these issues are forcing themselves, right?
I'm talking about the politics of the United States. In Europe, things are rather different because
I don't think you can separate these two anymore. I think the idea you can separate these things is an artifact of a previous age.
Well, conservative parties in Europe are...
Well, it depends where in Europe.
Okay, let's talk about the UK then. The Conservative Party in the UK is very different from the Republican Party in the United States.
Sure, but they still have to answer the question I brought up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, what I said was that for a coalition on the right to form, which is dominated by a racialist ideology, would be a bad thing. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't ever work with any racialists on anything ever.
You have to answer certain questions.
Like
that's what you have to do.
I mean, at this point, who else can we coalition with?
There were 3 questions on the board.
Okay.
The questions you have to answer are: do nations have the right to pursue a certain ethnic identity or not? Even if that ethnic identity is strongly linked with race.
Right. I think that I think that countries can have an interest in that, but I think that the American identity, is not connected with race. While this may not be true for other nations.
I'm not so sure about that anymore.
Yeah, like I think that it's actually even more strongly, because the specific nationalities and ethnicities of white people in the United States have sort of blended together. It's now more or less the American identity is white, so it's even more connected with race.
If there's a single cultural ethnicity that's incompatible with, the American Constitution, then you cannot say that Americanism is independent of ethnicity. And ethnicity is not independent of race. So transitory property, right?
What was that first premise of yours again?
As long as there's a single ethnic culture that's incompatible with the American Constitution, you cannot say that Americanism is completely unrelated to ethnicity. And ethnicity is not completely unrelated to race.
Okay, can you define,
and that's
is Muslim an ethnic identity?
He didn't
part,
say
yes.
Islam. He also didn't say Islam.
But I think you see the point, right? That I'm getting at, that this, these sort of aphorisms that we're just going to be colorblind. I mean, they were very easy to believe in the 90s. Even as myself, who's a non-racialist, I get the central premise question that the alt-right brings up, and that the previous conservative coalition has not answered.
Wait. So you're saying we should give up on the idea of a colorblind society because it is the current year?
No, because we've seen certain things.
Because this doesn't work. Because that narrative seems to be running current to reality.
It's manifestly. I mean, it is literally adopting a blindness.
Yep. It's adopting a blindness to many issues, and seeing that race isn't a factor is unfortunately wrong. That seems like the only thing that seems like to be the only thing that progressives and the alt-right seem to understand. They just take pretty different stances.
Can I put it a certain way, is that as much as we would like race to not play a factor in how society works, and as much as I think that there are certain circumstances in which that is possible, we do not live in that. The circumstances do not exist right now. They're currently getting worse. And the fact is that it's almost like saying, I wish it was, we all wish it was a society in which, you could be conservative American and your race didn't matter. The problem is that, and perhaps in some ways you could be that in a different time or a different era. The problem, or what I'm trying to say, is that right now, race and identity is now linked with each other. Racial identitarianism is now the new norm. It's becoming the norm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And given the and just to interject here, given the historical the history of race in the West, people of course will take the progressive narrative over the alt-right one. So, race.
I think it's going to get more polarized, to be honest. I think that you're going to get more people are going to be. Hold on, Ben. More right now, as we saw again, to bring this back to the Charlottesville, this is the center collapsing. There is no more American consensus. You have the progressives' view of what America is, and the alt-right's view of what America is. And currently, being in the center, Ben, you and probably people like Buckley, Joseph Buckley, and a lot of us have the sort of post-war American consensus. The problem is that that's a rapidly shrinking island in a sea in which people are becoming more and more polarized, and people are going to drift to either the alt-right or the progressives because they're the only ones offering an actual sort of vision of the world or vision of society.
A vision that is correct, or at least didn't get them into a financial
They are the
ruts
current
like the 2008.
Problems with what you were saying before don't just go away because you've changed the subject. Colorblindness, as I understand it, is a prescriptive ethic about race. It says you shouldn't treat people differently based on race. That's what a colorblind society means. It's not descriptive, it's prescriptive.
Okay.
But everything that you've said in saying in against that has been purely descriptive. And you can't get a prescriptive conclusion solely from descriptive premises.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this was what Distributives was laying out, so maybe he could help.
What's the question? Pardon, what's the question?
I said my understanding of the idea of a colorblind society is that is a prescriptive ethic, and everything that you've said against it has been purely descriptive. And you can't get a prescriptive conclusion like we shouldn't be trying to fight for a colorblind society
Yeah,
out of
colorblind society
premises. It logically does not follow.
Okay, but like a society where like no crimes are ever committed is also prescriptive objective. Would I design my society around the assumption that no crimes will be committed because we're committed to this ideal?
Well, how do we need to change how society is constructed in the light of rejecting the idea of a colorblind society? What are you saying we need to do differently than the colorblind society doctrine would suggest?
Well, I'm not.
We need who is that question directed to?
Well, distribute it to you or anyone else who's arguing against the idea of the colorblind society idea.
We need to take into account that ethnic identities are powerful forces that we have no ability to change via fiat of the state. That's what we need to recognize. And there are numerous policies in the West today that do not take that into account.
Such as?
Sorry.
Such as?
Such as our immigration rate, for one. I mean, just off the top of my head.
Well, I don't think that the colorblind society doctrine necessarily prescribes anything about the numbers or amount of immigration there ought to be. All it says is...
yeah, it does. Well, no, look. If we said that we wanted to totally throttle the immigration rate from sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East, the colorblind people would be coming in and saying, "Oh, you can't do that. We have to be colorblind."
Well, not necessarily, because if you said
nothing necessarily.
Okay.
Said we want to limit immigration to only high-skilled workers with clean backgrounds after a good background check, and that and then doing that across the board, wouldn't that get rid of most of the problem immigrants anyway?
No, not necessarily. Like, I mean, kind of going to be like, well, this is live. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of difficulties in large-scale immigration groups, even groups that have perfectly low crime rates and high skill rates, just not assimilating.
Oh, well, I think
that Western European populations, this problem does not exist for.
Well, I think that our naturalization and citizenship process should have metrics for assimilation, including learning the English language.
I don't know, man. I think we're trying to accomplish, this. There's no policy. You push this policy forward and call out we're colorblind. People are going to accuse you of hypocrisy.
Ben, let me put it this way. You said that colorblindness is this prescription, right? It's, to my understanding, it's a prescription that is mainly down, whereas the new prescription that progressives and the alt-right are conceiving are from the
Can you
bottom up.
start your-
Namely, that they've looked, namely, that people are realizing that many years after the civil rights movement, that there hasn't been a that other races are not seemingly as good as white people. People of color, and their words, are not doing as good as people who are white. Now, the answer to either of these is that, well, what we need to do on the left is to have equal outcome forcibly. Right? Say, well, from my understanding, we have equal opportunity. So maybe the people who are not white are inferior in some sort of way. Now, both of these are not right, really. But the idea of colorblindness still has not been able to answer the questions. And so the bottom-up prescription of society has been what's it called? Has been taking over purely because the top-down prescription has not been effective, or seemingly has not been effective. Do you understand what I mean? Do you understand what we mean by this? Would you say that's about correct, Distributus, Fritz?
Half of what you
No.
said in the beginning of your statement got messed up by the internet transmission.
Oh, you're kidding me.
That's why I asked.
Perhaps so we don't. Could we perhaps move on to something? I guess. I mean, my thoughts on all of this, right, is that, like, Ben, I agree. I don't think people. Obviously, I don't think we should stop telling people that you shouldn't discriminate on race. The problem is that they do, and the problem is that the idea that we'll just slap this idea of don't discriminate based on race, it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
And it also sort of denies reality. And I think
it doesn't
again,
work to accomplish what end?
It doesn't to its own end. It doesn't accomplish. It does. It goes against what human nature is. Human beings are much more tribalistic than we want them to be. Right? Ethnic identity is still very powerful. Racial identity as well. The problem is that, is it the questions we sort of have to ask is it are we able to live in a multiracial, multi-ethnic society and coexist peacefully?
Not without Christianity.
Perhaps.
Well, I don't know what to say to you. I mean, are we dealing with reality, like the actual state of the country as it is?
Well,
or is this like a discussion about some country we wish we were living in right now?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that that the rate of success that America has had in having a
I don't see all that much success.
High racial diversity. I said the amount of success that we have had has been largely due to Christianity.
I gotta go, guys.
We have been failing on this, I think, because of the collapse of Christianity. I mean, it's a symptom of the disease.
Okay, but we're failing then, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean,
but then
doesn't the reality at some point set in and require you to modify your practical approach to this sort of idealized world you want?
Well, you change your means based on what is happening in the world.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking for.
You don't change your ends based on what's happening in the world.
Yeah, I want a zero crime society too, but I don't act like zero crime society is something we can just use to like veto reality.
I'm not entirely clear on what you're asking for. Maybe with regards to immigration, we need to take into account perhaps nationality. I don't think we necessarily need to take into account race.
Ben, I hate to break it to you, but races are largely segregated around nationhood.
Well, then
We're just proxying one in for the other.
That seems to support my point. Because if
no, it just means that we're
is,
taking what we're doing and switching it around a little bit. I don't know, man.
Well, if you can still get the effect, if you can still get beneficial effects, I don't see why.
I'm confused as to what's the point of this again? I mean, what
sorry guys, I need to go. I'm sorry.
Okay. See ya.
Okay.
Well, we can wrap this up soon anyways. We'll talk for a little bit longer, but it's only me and Ben, and Serb does not have a microphone. I don't know why he came onto the stream in the first place, but it's fine. Yeah.
Well, I might say about this whole thing in Charlottesville, if we want to get back to
that's what I sort of wanted to do.
I think that this kind of thing is what we see with the political pendulum, right?
No, the political pendulum doesn't exist.
No, what? No, it totally does.
No, it doesn't.
When we have
it's something that gets that's a very that's like the 1980s Reaganite baby boomer thing where it's like, oh, it was really conservative in the 50s and early 60s, and then it went really liberal, and now it's swung back conservative in the 80s. But the thing is, it didn't swing back conservative in the 80s. After Reagan's second term was up, we still had no-fault divorce. We still had legal abortion. We still had decriminalized homosexuality. We still had, an increasing violent crime rate and, increasing rates of single motherhood and divorce. It's the pendulum, or essentially the force of society, is controlled by the people who control society, which are elites. And the elites and people who control culture and education are progressives, and they were progressives in the 80s.
Sure, society does change in a definite direction over time, but it does so by how do you say, 2 steps forward, 1 step back?
I don't believe this.
That's what happens. I mean,
I think that seems to describe post-war America, which
Reagan
was notwithstanding the fact that the history of post-war America is only a slice of the history of one country out of many, many countries around the world, of thousands and thousands of years of history. The problem is that what I see happening is you have the progressives taking, having a consistent push into their direction of what they think is utopia, and Republicans only occasionally managing to delay them for certain amounts of time. Okay. That's all I've seen happen. I haven't seen you didn't have a situation where divorce became legal and so did abortion, and then abortion was illegal again, and then you had abortion and then gay marriage. You didn't have that happen.
Sure, well,
so far, progressives have been able to get everything they've wanted.
Sure, but that's not exactly what I meant by a political pendulum. I'm talking about not in terms of who's in power, but in terms of violence. We had left-wing violence at Berkeley, and it eventually gets responded to by this right-wing violence in Charlottesville. Next, we're going to see more left-wing violence from Antifa, and then we're going to see more right-wing violence.
I think what's more likely going to happen is you're going to have both sides start being violent towards each other at the. You're just going to have both sides being violent towards each other at these rallies upcoming. And eventually, you know what's going to happen? Someone's going to bring a gun. Pretty much after this, if this guy had come out with a gun and started shooting people, then this could have gone really bad. And even if it didn't. At the next riot, people will be bringing guns and they'll be shooting.
I wouldn't be too
And-
surprised if the white supremacists weren't already bringing guns to all of their stuff.
Well, they probably are, but the thing is that, like, yeah, this is going to turn into this is going to turn deadly. It's going to turn violent. The problem is that
Hang on. Since we're on stream, I want to just say for anyone who's listening, when I say white supremacists, I mean actual white supremacists,
Yeah.
not BS white supremacists.
not people that wear Trump "Make America Great Again" hats and say that they're part of Kekistan.
They have cartoon frogs. That's not what the real white supremacists are.
Hey, Ben, I don't know if you've heard this yet, but I made up my own. You know how there's like the pictures of frogs where it's hippity hoppity, get off my property. I made one for distributism. It's called hippity hoppity, everyone gets some property. But yes, I'd say that the problem is the optics. Because let's say this: if it was a left-wing Antifa protester running into the white supremacists, then that would have, the left would have had to either they would have had to keep denying it, or what they would have probably said. They would have said like, well, it's fine because we're killing Nazis. That's fine. And then all hell would have started to break loose because you'd have like another, like what happened with CNN blackmail. It would further legitimize this idea that you can just kill you can just kill Nazis. You can kill anybody that you think is a Nazi. And guess who the left progressives think is a Nazi? Everyone that they disagree with.
Yeah, that's something I've been tweeting at a lot of left-wing people who just say stupid stuff. I'll just tweet at them. Just step one. Step one, promote that it's okay to punch Nazis. Step two, define literally everyone who disagrees with you as a Nazi. Step three, get award for tolerance.
Remember, love trumps hate. That's why it's like, this is the thing I want to try and like help Christians understand, that racism, like actual racism, is bad. I don't think all forms of racial discrimination are sin in terms of like, everybody has their natural sort of attractions. Like, like
we should definitely be checking, Mohammed al-Saddam at the airport more than grandma from Michigan. Obviously.
No, I'm talking about this is just like that, like if you see something, if you're actually like, say you're like, you see some like African-American guys, and I'm not actually being racist here. Don't worry. Hashtag not all. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. The problem, right, Ben, is that, if you're a little, like, what a lot of conservative Christians seem to be trying to tell people is that, like, hey, when you were walking down, like, hey, white woman, when you're walking down the city streets at night and, like, you see some black guys wearing, like, sweatshirts and hoodies and stuff like that, even if they don't do anything and you sort of clutch your purse, that's a sin, and if you don't repent of that, you're going to hell. Or like, hey, how everybody's like naturally will have certain attractions to certain races, like saying like, hey, I'm more attracted to white people than black people. Well, apparently, if I date a person because partially based on their race, or like, let's say I choose a partner and I marry them, and like part of my physical attraction to them is because of the way they look, and a lot of that does have to do with their race. Apparently, that's a sin. I think that's absurd.
That's absurd, and I don't think that's what was meant by the idea of a colorblind society. I don't think that's what they mean. I don't think that's what was meant. Like you shouldn't even like that. The idea isn't that like you should try to never discriminate in who you're dating or whatever. That I don't think that was ever part of the theory.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, when Christians say this, I think that's not what they mean anyways. I think what they mean, they think that is what is an actual sin, which is, actually being like an active like racist and saying, I hate this person, or I hate these people. Now, the actual hating people, that's the sin of, and the reason behind it, the reasoning behind it is obviously not good. But the problem is that even if racism is a sin and racial discrimination isn't good in certain cases, like in terms of who you date, it's not good or bad. It's just neutral, right? Is that racism, this is the thing that has to be said, right? Racism is bad, but there's worse things in the world than racism.
Oh, definitely.
This is the golden cow, isn't it, of people in the West, right?
I also might point out that I only agree that racism is bad under the ideological definition of racism. I do not agree that racism is necessarily bad under the sociological definition of racism. I'm not even convinced that the sociological definition of racism is even a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd need to see the argument on that. I mean, I've seen the argument on ideological racism. It's from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's in his I Have a Dream speech, and it's in his letter from Birmingham jail. The argument is there, and it's put in terms of natural law theory, that's speaking the language of socially conservative Christians, straight out of Aquinas, okay? That's where Dr. King is arguing from.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of philosophy, I think that at least on this issue of being against ideological racism, I think that Dr. King's arguments are pretty rock solid. And not on every subject. I mean, I don't share his pacifism or his support for socialism or a number of his other ideas, but
or his adultery.
Yeah, but his point on ideological racism is sound. The trouble is the same arguments don't work for this sociological idea of racism.
Which is that's the power plus privilege thing, right?
Yeah. Dr. King was not even talking about that. His arguments don't work for that. So they either need a new set of arguments or they need to drop that nonsense.
Yeah, the thing is that this is the biggest issue I have, or this is the thing that's most frustrating, right? Is that people like everybody knows. No, that's the problem is that skeptics and people like us can scream until we're blue in the face about everything from like what racism really is or why the progressives are wrong on all these issues. But the thing is, at the end of the day, none of what we say seems to matter because, like, I've said this in a video once, right, is that they think, a lot of the skeptics seem to think that the reason why progressives don't come to debate is because they'll know they'll lose. Actually, the reason why they don't come to debate is because they don't gain anything from it. Because it's like, I've already won it's like, if I won a game show, I've already won the prize. They want me to come back on the game show and potentially lose. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Progressives don't want to debate because they're already in power. They might not always think they don't think of themselves as being in power, but they act according to the idea that they're already in power.
Yes, and this is the sort of disturbing or concerning thing is that
the
distributist narrative seems to be that progressives are in control right now. They're going to be in control for the next, couple decades or so. But eventually, because they don't have infinite resources, progressivism is going to collapse. And that's going to be the beginning of the collapse of modern society. I'm just not... The thing is, I could almost see it going the other way, in which, like, I think their vision of the future is Star Trek. That they want this sort of utopian future. I think that if our technological advances reach the point in which, like, people don't have to actually go out and work, or people can just sort of not engage in society, they probably could get their way with this then,
Yeah,
The thing is, everybody, as long as they can keep people... The thing is, like, the Roman Empire couldn't sustain itself because they couldn't keep giving people... They could only keep giving people bread and circuses for so long until the money ran out. The problem is that now with technology, it almost seems like we could be approaching a situation in which the money or the resources in which to keep people fat and happy, supplied with the latest iPhone and distractions, isn't going to run out.
Oh, it will.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's like we're probably going. Yeah, you're probably right because we're probably going to hit a economic crash in a few years.
Yeah, these things they fluctuate. I do think we're going to continue to have high technology. I do believe that we probably will continue to have high technology, but we could end up with problems in other areas. Like we could end up with lots and lots of machines and not enough energy to run them. Or
we can eventually hit peak oil.
Or the energy runs out, or something, or
Yellowstone, Jellystone National Park blows up.
Yeah, I don't think that we're gonna like objectively run out of energy, but I think we are probably gonna do it to ourselves.
According to the laws of physics, you can't run out of energy.
Well, I don't. I think there's just so much energy available through nuclear power and through geothermal and solar and all this other stuff that we could be doing, and I think that as oil becomes more expensive, then we're going to see those options become more economically viable. But
this is the big thing, right?
Doing all this diversity hiring nonsense where we've got jobs filled with people who have no idea what the hell they're even doing. We're going to have a collapse like straight out of an Ayn Rand novel where we have all this technology. We don't have the people who understand how to use it.
Well, this is what I don't want to read this because it sounds too depressing. Is there was a book that's a French novel written in the 70s called The Camp of the Saints about essentially what's happened to Europe right now. But apparently what's happening to Europe right now is even worse than what's described in the novel, which is essentially it's the same phenomenon in which you just have an endless wave of millions and millions and millions of sub-Saharan Africans and Middle Easterners flooding into Europe and Western society is completely evaporated. Not necessarily, and this is the thing, it's I am not race realist. I think that there's definitely people there are black people, there are non-whites that are completely capable of being, Thomas Sowell is a much better Westerner than, Christy Winters is. And she's white and he's black. The problem is that having a small amount of very highly skilled immigrants come to the country is fine. I don't really care where they're from. The problem is that if you flood the country with them to have too many, you completely destroy your own culture. You can't. It's impossible. It becomes impossible for them to integrate.
If you flood the country with low-skilled workers from anywhere, then you're going, more than will meet. If you flood the country with low-skilled workers from anywhere, you're going to depress wages, and it's just going to be a mess. And then if they don't even speak the same language, you're going to end up with societal conflict on a massive scale.
And this is the thing, this is what's going to happen. The only reason why there isn't mass riots in Europe right now is the fact that they've been trained for several decades not to protest and not to care about their own culture. Well, the thing is, they're going to start caring once the money runs out and they can't afford their next iPhone or they can't afford to drive to work.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, we need to get going here. I've gotta wrap this up.
Well, it's my channel. You don't need to wrap this up. I do.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying I've got to get going, and I think I'm.
Yeah, we've been on for a couple hours or something. That's fine. That's sort of what I was planning on. So, any last sort of thoughts, Ben, about what you think about this whole Charlottesville and stuff?
Closing thoughts. We absolutely must not give an inch on censorship. On this censorship issue. It'll probably happen, but we need to be fighting it tooth and nail, and not give no quarter to the arguments of that will support it.
The issue that I sort of have,
if you support all this censorship, you are a fascist, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, the thing I would say that I have an issue with is that we should fight it, certainly. The problem is that, the issue is, what exactly can we do? We're not in power right now. And the progressives just were delivered a trump card in terms of, they can play this, look, this is why we need to start, having hate speech laws, because if you don't have hate speech laws, Nazis will run over black people with their car.
I think that we've already seen what's probably going to happen next. There's probably going to be an antitrust suit against Google.
Well, I wish that would happen. I don't think there is.
I think that's what's going to happen because we've seen the right-wing media in the last few weeks and months starting slowly to lay the groundwork for it.
I hope that happens. The thing is, the problem is that our biggest enemy, I would say, is indifference. Is that not enough people care? It's like the whole CNN thing didn't amount to anything. Like, if you had this organized thing like Gamergate, right, where you just had this endless sort of research into all the horrible... Imagine this, if you had thousands of people online constantly buzzing about, you know, for months on end about airing out all the dirty laundry that CNN has been doing over the years. That actually could accomplish something, but it went away after a couple days.
You know why it went away after a couple days? Because it wasn't suppressed. Gamergate exploded because there were active attempts to suppress it.
Mm-hmm.
CNN blackmail, first of all, it's just one guy who is the victim of it. And second, there was no attempt to suppress the story. You know,
that's true.
So, yeah.
Well, that's actually scarier because, like, they thought, hey, we have nothing to hide. It's fine that we did this. We don't have a problem with saying, hey, we're going to dox people if you disagree with us.
Well,
the thing is, it's not going to work because everybody ran around and said, hey, we're going to say whatever we want about CNN, and we don't care if you want to dox us.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, if there were attempts to, you know, suppress the opinion about CNN that was spreading across the internet, you know, by Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, then the story would have exploded.
Mm-hmm.
And there would have been no containing it. But they let it burn itself out, and they didn't just didn't say anything about it, but didn't try to fight against the story's spread either, and so it burned itself out. And that's what all these stories would do. That's what Gamergate would have done if it hadn't been suppressed, actively suppressed.
I would say this is that I guess this should be a stream for another time. Or what I want to start focusing on more, because we sort of have to wrap up now. Sorry, Snake, you just came in as we're wrapping up, but
that's all right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's fine. We can talk afterwards.
Yeah, Snake, we need to have a what you call, not right now because we're too late, but we need to have a big
trouble
for race and stuff at some point.
But anyway,
I'm looking forward to that conversation, Ben.
Let me talk. Yeah, I would say we have to start coming up with real solutions because the skeptics are coming up with solutions. The liberals don't have solutions. The progressives have the alt-right have bad solutions. The progressives have really bad solutions. And with that, I will leave you, my lovelies. Have a good night.